our second speaker, I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Frederick Sante, to come to the podium. Introduce our guest, Dr. Peter Boettke.
When Elizabeth and I were, us at the Social Center were thinking about the Novak event, and it turned out that it would be on social justice, I immediately thought of Peter Boettke as a very good speaker for this. For many reasons, Pete, first of all, actually introduced me to the work of Michael Novak. And even though he's not himself a Catholic, he's married to a Catholic wife, which I guess redeems him in some way or another. He's even though he wouldn't probably say this, he has a very Catholic-influenced research program in some ways. So I want to say a few words about this so that you understand why we invited Pete to speak about Hayek. It turns out that Pete just published a book on Hayek. He's definitely one of the foremost scholars on Hayek out there. And Hayek, for those who know a bit about him, has a very interesting position on social justice. And since social justice is the last, or maybe before last book that Michael Novak published, we thought it would be a very interesting contrast to look at what Hayek said and how this is compatible or not with the thought of Michael Novak. I first met Pete many years ago as a student. He was teaching at NYU at the time, and he was actually involved in one of these major areas, which I think has a lot to do with Catholicism in some ways, which was Sovietology. Not many today know what Sovietology is about, although it's probably about to come back. And he's written actually several books on Soviet Russia. The most famous one is The Political Economy of Soviet Socialism, which is a really fantastic book about Soviet Russia. And I think with his work on Soviet Russia, he drove many insights that is used in his classes and that I actually use myself in my classes as well, especially the idea that intentions and results are two different things, especially in policy. Another way of putting it is the difference between the de jure, what is legal, and the de facto, what do people do. So that theme of what was going on in Soviet Russia became a pretty big deal in Pete's work, and he formalized one of the concepts that I think is most interesting in political economy, which is the idea of robust political economy. How can we have a social order that is robust enough that it can withstand attacks from the inside and still remain a social order based on ideas and freedom and personal exchange and the like. And I think it's very Catholic in many ways because it's rooted in a very realistic epistemology, which is a distinguishing mark of many of the Austrian economists to which Pete belongs. Another topic that I want also to mention is he's done a lot of reflection on why is it the case that economics was not that successful in the 20th century. If you think about it, he likes to say that the 20th century was a big mistake, and it has a lot to do with economics, actually, not good economics, but bad economics. And one of my favorite papers of Pete is entitled, "Where Did Economics Go Wrong?" He hates me saying this because he wrote this paper 25 years ago, and that's as if, you know, everything he's written since then is not that good. But it is definitely one of my favorite papers of his. And in this paper, he actually talks about economics as a flight from reality, which I think is very pregnant of a lot of the ideas that we hold here at the Bush School and at CUA, especially a flight from the reality of the human person. The human person in economics, which, as you know, became totally robotic. Modern economics is the economics of robots, really, not the economics of human persons. So out of that, he formulated ideas such as the main line of economics versus the mainstream, something I associated a lot to, and he can tell you more about this than I can. But again, I think there's a lot of Catholicism going on, even though he would never say that. A third line of analysis, and I will briefly finish with that, is the idea of anarchy as a research program. So that can rub many Catholic thinkers in the wrong way, but I think it should not. It should not. Because a lot of thinkers in the church are way too much in love with what the state can do and achieve. And Pete's research program on the political economy of anarchism actually shows how decentralized solutions emerge in the social order, solving problems in a very Catholic way, which is subsidiarity-based, right? So again, that third research program, which some may see as a problem, is actually very conducive to Catholic thinking. Some of these grad students have gone on to write very interesting work in that field. For instance, Pete Gleason, who is a young, brilliant economist, has done a lot of work on what he calls the invisible hook, the economics of pirate organization, and showing how pirates were actually extremely sophisticated in the way they organized themselves. They didn't have any state, yet their system worked well. Not to say that we're endorsing piracy, but it's very interesting to study how organizations of that sort worked. Another one studied the self-organization of the underworld, how gangs in prison organize. Again, very interesting how decentralized solutions to social problems can emerge. Pete Boettke is extremely prolific. He's written 9 or 10 books, I think, and co-edited many others. I think he has more than 150 articles published so far. He's the co-author of one of the most famous textbooks in economics called The Economic Way of Thinking, which was started by Paul Haynes. Some of you may know Paul Haynes. He was a theologian himself who hated economics, went on to study economics, realized there was a lot of lessons to learn from economics, and became an economist himself. So very interesting, again, line here of thinking that Pete belongs to. Pete has been my longtime friend, but I have to say that maybe one of the things I'm most proud of is that we have co-authored together for the last 10 years the collected works of Israel Kirzner. Israel Kirzner is one of the greatest thinkers on market processes and entrepreneurship, still alive today. He's the direct heir of Schumpeter and many others. So we've done that together, and I will never thank Pete enough for doing this. So he's going to be talking about social justice in a much better way than me. Please join me in applauding Pete.
Fred talked about my relationship with Catholicism. He didn't actually explain the full context of that. I'm culturally Catholic because I grew up in New Jersey, outside of New York City, in which basketball is the king of all sports. You go to other parts of the country, football will be the big sport, whatever. Here in New Jersey, basketball is. And the best basketball when I was a kid growing up, trying to learn how to play, was CYO basketball. So even though I wasn't a Catholic kid, I went over and played on the CYO basketball team, which meant that I had to go through different things, and I learned to go like this when I went up on Sundays. And I was involved, and ironically, I started playing, and Coach Jack Bruin, who many of you might know as a famous Catholic University player, and also led Catholic University to a national championship here many years ago before he went on. And I met him when I was a sophomore in high school from New Jersey. He would be part of this group. I was part of a group that played New York, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. kids, you know, WCAC kids and all that stuff. And so I've had a long-time relationship with Catholic. I love the school. I love the coach here. And in fact, when I was coaching, which I did for many years, I sent my best player here, who was a first-team All-American. And for any of you who are maybe were professors here, you might remember Chris Carney, who was first-team All-American here at Catholic University and then played professional all over Spain. So I have very deep roots connected here, which have little to do with theology, but a lot to do with the sort of culture of the priests being involved. Actually, you know, the coaches and everything back when I was a kid, a lot of the coaches were the priests, the brothers that were involved in it. So anyway, they were always very good to me, and so I appreciate that. And I'm thrilled to be able to come here and talk. I also met Michael Novak at conferences and everything, and I have no real close connection with him, but I do have an intellectual connection. And one of the things that I'll come back to here, and I recommend everyone to look at, is you can listen to the lecture online, but you can also dig up the actual written version of it. But in 1999, at the University of Chicago, they had a conference to honor the 100th birthday of Hayek. And Novak was one of the main speakers at that. He talked on the issue of Hayek as a practitioner of social justice. And it's extremely important to keep that in mind, because Hayek is known as a major critic of social justice. But what Novak does in that piece is agree with Hayek's criticism of social justice as understood by most intellectuals, but then demonstrates how Hayek actually was a practitioner of social justice that should be understood, the correct idea of the concept. And so I'll come back to that. But let me start by just showing you a little experiment. This is going to frame things. This is an experiment in technology.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Blossom we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group, they know each other, we take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now if you give the part the grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes as a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece he eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And the other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. fists are rocking now against the wall. He needs to give it to us. And he gets together again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
Okay, I want you to keep that in mind for the conversation that we're going to have about social justice. All right, so what I'm going to talk about is Hayek on social justice in a liberal society. I'm a professor at George Mason University. My appointment is both in the economics department and the philosophy department there. This is the cover of my new book that's on Hayek. This is part of a series called Great Thinkers in Economics. It's very expensive, so don't allow yourself to get ripped off by the predatory publishers because you belong to a university. What you can do is you can go to your university link and go on through a thing called through Springer Journals, and because you have access to that, you get it for $25. Through a thing called My Copy or whatever. $25 is easier to push than what did you say, Fred? $96. Yeah, that. All right. So what I want to try to do here is go through this idea of Hayek offers a critique of the idea of social justice. His main idea is that our moral intuitions are going to be at odds with the moral demands of the great society. The reason for this is because our moral intuitions are a product of a long evolutionary path which begins with our tribal beginnings, or small groups, or in-group settings, as opposed to out-group interactions. In order to have the advanced division of labor of the modern society, though, we have to interact with strangers. In fact, the term that was used in economics, the Greek term to mean exchange, catalaxy, also means turning a stranger into friends. And this was, in fact, the foundation of the core argument for why markets were valuable by Adam Smith and David Hume, and before him, Voltaire and other ones, which was what's called the du commerce thesis. The idea that commerce turns strangers or enemies into friends. It's the foundation of civil interactions. Both parties walk away and say thank you. Right? So it's a mutually beneficial aspect of exchange. But what are the moralities that are required for us to achieve that mutual beneficial activity? And what are our moral intuitions tell us? And so the third point is the principles of just conduct have to be abstract and general. Because we live in a modern society in which we cannot expect to come to agreement over ends. So therefore, we can only agree about the means by which we interact with one another. By the way, that does not mean that we shouldn't have an ongoing cultural conversation about ends. It's just that there is no way that we're going to be able, in a pluralistic society, to be able to come to a single ordered set of ends that we can all agree on. So then how do we interact with each other? All right, so the fairness experiment. What do I want you to get out of that? Well, the first thing is, think about that from respect to social justice. First, it's not envy or spite. Envy or spite would be against the other monkey. Right? So when you saw the other monkey get the grape, and you got the cucumber, what you would do is turn to the monkey that got the grape and try to get the grape from them. That's not what's going on, is it? Instead, the direction is at the distributor. The anger is at the central distributor. That fits with our moral intuitions. This is the problem that Novak points out, and what Hayek, when he agrees with Hayek on what the problem is the concept of social justice. Is that we somehow believe that there's an individual distributor, but if there is no central distributor, then our anger directed as if our social system had a single distributor is an inaccurate way to express our ideas. And as he points out, Novak points out, and Hayek points out, if social justice is a virtue, that's about an individual characteristic, not a social characteristic. And so Novak agrees with Hayek that in the 20th century, some of the most ugly acts that have been perpetrated on humanity are by people that claim to be pursuing the social justice. But that's because we had a wrong concept of social justice. So we need to get that fixed. So what if there's no central director or central distributor? Where will these emotions guide us? And how do we tame those emotions with our reason so that we actually can address the correct notion of social justice? We just had it. Yeah, okay. So, what do we think about sort of Hayek's quest? So this is a great title of a book called The Quest for Exact Thinking in Demented Times. It's by a mathematician, Carl Sigmund, who talks about what it was like to live in Vienna from 1900 to 1950. So many of you probably already know one of my favorite books capturing the zeitgeist of Vienna in the early part of the 20th century is The World of Yesterday by Stefan Zweig. And just imagine that. In 1900, this is the pinnacle of civilization. Right? This is the glory, this is the golden town, right? Is Vienna. And yet barbarism is only a few decades away. So what was it like for that world to be torn asunder from you? All right? This is also, I mean, just think about the products of Vienna. Stephen Toulmin's book, Wittgenstein's Vienna, is a fantastic window into this as well. I should point out, and this is, again, just a little aside, it has nothing to do with my talk, but when I was a graduate student, I came down to Catholic here to see the great continental philosopher Hans Georg Gadamer, because Sokolowski, who's a fantastic philosopher, phenomenologist, and teaches here, and I understand he still is here, which is amazing, because Gadamer was 100 years old when he gave the talk here, and he was perfectly, I've only seen that happen twice. Thomas Schelling, the great Nobel Prize-winning economist, and Gadamer both give talks at 100 without notes. And it was more coherent than a 25-year-old on the job market, whose life depended on the talk. And it's amazing. But I remember coming down here and seeing that, so it's phenomenal. All right, so the thing is Hayek was born in 1899, and he dies in 1992. So it's important to kind of see all the things that went on during his life to understand what is the background in which he's engaged in this dialogue about political economy and the moral sciences. And so you have World War I, which he participated in. He was a soldier on the front line. Okay? You have the Great Depression, in which he's an economist trying to actually explain what are the causes and consequences of the Great Depression. He's involved in World War II and the rise of totalitarianism on the left and the right. And then he's involved, of course, in the Cold War during this period of time. And so if you see, like, this chart to my left, your right, these are modest figures that are taken, which have three different types. They're the most amount of numbers, the middle amount of numbers, and then the least numbers of the death toll during the 20th century due to these various activities. These are not like people just dying because they got older or whatever. This is, the state putting a bullet in the back of your head. And these figures are staggering. Mary just gave a talk here. Her husband, Nicholas, is an outstanding demographer and has detailed a lot of the various aspects of the tragedy of communism that I recommend to all of you read, that not only in terms of this, but also in terms of sort of the great book by this guy, Yuri Boettke, years ago about the ecological damage that was done to these societies because of these regimes. So the facts are not in dispute. AOC is just wrong. Okay? But, by the way, those of you who are on the right side of the spectrum are making a huge mistake if you think that she's not smart. She's actually brilliant. It's unbelievable how smart she is with social media and savvy. She's every bit the equivalent of Trump on that one. And so we're going to have her for a long time. She also picked a district which she'll never lose in, right? So she's a lifetime politician now, at the age of 20. Sort of something like what Bernie did. So what's the big problem of this? This is the alliance that threatens the social scientists into becoming tyrants and destroyers. This is the alliance between statism and scientism. This was one way in which people tried to get exact thinking in the Demented Times, but that's what generated the Demented Times, was this alliance. By the way, just to put Hayek in perspective, Hayek won the Nobel Prize. Well, first, Hayek rose to fame very young for technical economics. He was in his 30s, one of the most famous economists in the world. Then he writes The Road to Serfdom, and that kind of discredits him with his colleagues within economics, because the book, by the way, is a much more subtle book than what people think it is, but nevertheless. And so he kind of had a long period of time in the wilderness. And then, he actually bounced back and became, famous. And so one of the things that's in this book that I have that we document is Hayek's citation pattern. So among Nobel Prize winners, among citations among other Nobel Prize winners, Hayek is only second to Kenneth Arrow. Among the Nobel Prize winners in general, just in terms of the broad social science thing, Hayek comes in fourth. The number one person is Herbert Simon, and that's because Herbert Simon is both a computer scientist, management expert, public administration, economics, all over the place. But Hayek compares dominantly favorable over the vast majority of Nobel Prize winners. His article, Use of Knowledge in Society, is considered one of the top 20 articles in the history of modern economics. That was picked by other economists. So it's not the case that Hayek sort of was completely disregarded, but he did have this arc in which his career has a meteoric rise, a crashing defeat, and then a coming back. And he gets given a Nobel Prize. 1974. The Nobel Prize established in economics in 1969. Hayek is given the prize in 1974. He gives the toast. So just imagine. That's like the equivalent of, for economists, of getting the Academy Award. Okay? So most of us think that we're supposed to be like, Sally Fields. You get up there and you say, you like me, you really like me. I like you too. But instead, Hayek does his toast, and his first toast is, one, if I was asked, I never would have agreed that we should have a Nobel Prize in economics. So thank you, but really we shouldn't have it. And he gives his talk. And in his talk, which I recommend all of you to read, it's called The Pretense of Knowledge. Okay? And it's not about a criticism of socialism, it's about a criticism of the practice of mainstream economics at the time. So he begins his talk, remember the time period, 1974. So what is the world experiencing in 1974? We have high levels of unemployment, high levels of inflation, right? And Hayek comes in and he says, one, we economists must admit we've made a mess of things. We didn't make the world better by aligning ourselves with scientism and statism. Okay? Two, because we've tried to say that economics can deliver X, but economics cannot deliver X, but we insist that economics deliver X, we put our discipline on the verge of charlatanism. Thank you. Okay? Then three, this process has put us so that we, in our capacity as policy advisors, have put ourselves on the precipice of being tyrants over our fellow citizens. And just if you didn't get that point so far. And then finally, destroyers of civilization. I really like the prize, thank you. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? That's actually in his speech. So I didn't editorialize on any of that. All those claims are made in his speech. It's pretty amazing that he had that position. But why is he having this position against economics? I don't have the time to actually talk about this as much, but this relates to what Fred was talking about in terms of the tradition. Clara over here and we just wrote a review essay on Mary Hirschfield's book. Aquinas and the Market, that's going to be coming out in the Symposium in Villanova. And one of the things that's really important, this is based on Clara's work, is actually the role that the confessor plays in the history of economics. And that is the School of Salamanca. And as Mary points out in her book, the reason why Aquinas was starting to focus on teaching theology was he was teaching theology to the young Dominicans so that they could be, in fact, better parish priests to their flock. And that opened up in the School of Salamanca the studying of economics, as opposed to just studying of church doctrine, studying the day-to-day. Think about questions like, what is a just price? Well, what was the Salamancans? What was their answer to that? The market price. The just price is the market price. And the reason why they started to do that is this is too much economic history and issue of economic thought. I apologize. But the reason is that if you look at the way capitalism starts to develop, markets start to develop, they start in Southern Europe. They don't really take off until you get to Northern Europe. That's why Holland is the first modern economy. But advanced commerce and everything is down in Southern Europe. And you have all kinds of interesting developments there, including the development of double entry bookkeeping and all kinds of things like that. Well, one of the problems is that following the policies, they would have what they call the species flow doctrine. They would go out and they would conquer, right? And they would come back with tons of gold. And then that gold would then filter into the economy. Now, all of a sudden, what does it mean to have a just price? Because what was going on, we call it today inflation. And they wanted to understand what all that meant with inflation. And this is why, for example, Juan Mariana, he wrote a book about how you can kill the king. And everyone was like, yeah, it's okay. Leave him alone. But then he writes a book about how inflation can destroy the economy, and the king puts him in jail. Okay? So it's a very fascinating kind of idea. And so Clara and I try to talk about this idea. Well, what's one of the things about that idea is that the economist is not a savior at all. The economist is a student of society. And as a result, that student of society is a much humbler role than what was demanded of the economist in the 20th century. The second volume of Keynes's biography by Skidowski is called The Economist as Savior. Hayek would never allow himself to be considered like that. He was a student. And this is a very important distinction that we still have in common. We still have a council of economic advisors. Maybe we shouldn't. Right? Not that we should have a council of theological advisors either. Okay? That would be problematic. I'm a professor of philosophy, politics, and economics. And in our building, we have the quote from Hayek. It says that nobody can be a good economist who's only an economist. And in fact, the economist who's only an economist could be a downright danger to society. And I always say, look, I have a proviso, which is that nobody's as dangerous as an economist who only knows economics, except for a moral philosopher who knows no economics at all. And so you gotta understand which battles we're fighting there. All right. So the Hayek's arc of his career relates to this issue when he starts out as a technical economist, simply asking the question. Now, here's the easiest way for all of you to sort of get this, especially for the students. Because I imagine some of the students here, you've had some economics classes or finance or whatever, and you might have a thing where they teach you a present value calculation. Right? You know, just a basic present value calculation. Here's an interesting exercise for you to do. Write down that formula. Right? It's a very simple formula. Now, step back from the formula and think about all the institutions that have to be in practice in order for you to be able to do that calculation and do it reliably. Very, very simple formula. But to do it reliably, what do you need? Well, one, you need to have sound money. Because otherwise, that would distort what the rate of return is going to be. You'd have to have hard budget constraints. Because if you could prioritize your profits but socialize your losses, you're going to disregard that calculation as well. You have to have security of private property. Because if you make an investment and it yields a return, and then I'm able to bop you over the head and take it from you,
you're not going to make that original investment to begin with. And so we start thinking about all the background institutions that are required for us to do a very basic economic calculation, present values, capital accounting. We start to understand, like, okay, so what's Hayek talking about? He's trying to develop this idea about how prices are these guides. So the fundamental idea, and again, mainly for the students, is, you know, if you remember, there's 3 P's and 3 I's. Right? So you have property prices and profit and loss, and that's because they give you incentives, information, and innovation. Without the 3 P's, you don't get the 3 I's, and you're stuck in poverty. End of story. There's no unicorn out there. No society which abolishes private property, abolishes price system, and abolishes profits and losses, and living in economic nirvana. Okay? And the same thing, if you have security of property, free flow of prices, accurate profit and loss accounting, you don't have anyone in the economic basket case. As I tell all my students, since I'll pick out Candace here, like Candace and I are going to go to Vegas. And I say, hey, Candace, I'll cover all of your losses, but you get to keep all your profits. Are you going to be highly leveraged in your bets, or are you going to be very conservative? Yeah, her name is called Goldman Sachs. The financial crisis was at all confusing if you understand the basic incentives that everyone is engaged in that behavior. All right, so this is Hayek's first part of his career, which is all about developing the arguments about prices, profit, property prices, and profit and loss. But here's the problem. His students that he's teaching at the LSE, that's him teaching at the LSE, he was notoriously a bad teacher, right? Because he couldn't really speak English all that well, but he spoke English better than Mises, which is why he got the job. Robbins wanted to hire Mises, but Mises couldn't speak English at all. Very little. So Hayek got hired. So in the 1930s, Hayek was this great success with his writing. But by the end of the 1930s, all of his students had abandoned him for Keynesianism and market socialism. And so Hayek has his moment. He's like, what's going on? In a famous essay in 1933, he argues, look, the trend of economic thinking is such that you can only be an extreme demander for centralization if you deny the teachings of economics. But by the end of the 1930s, all the students who were now advanced students of economics are demanding for government management of the economy. So Hayek is like, what's going on? So that leads him to philosophy. And that's the second stage of his career. It's called the Abuse of Reason Project. And he adopted Hume's mantra, which is, I'm going to use reason to whittle down the claims of reason. Right? And he wants to introduce this into the process. And this starts with the road to serfdom, but it's also connected most definitely to counter-revolution science, and his book on studies in philosophy, politics, and economics. It's where he does his epistemology. Now, you know, at some levels, this is a kind of a strange thing, because it goes off in a detour of intellectual history about why it is that economics got derailed, and he believes it's in French rational constructivism. Right? So it's all because they went in the direction of constructivism, rather than understanding the evolutionary epistemology that's involved in, like, the Scottish Enlightenment. So the problem is we picked the wrong Enlightenment. Right? We followed the French Enlightenment rather than the Scottish Enlightenment. Only if we had done the Scottish Enlightenment, we wouldn't have gotten derailed. That's his sort of view. In a nutshell, not. It's more subtle than that, but I'm just giving that. So then he gets done with that project, and then what happens is he wants to then say, okay, I've cleared the ground, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how to restate this Scottish Enlightenment liberal project for the modern era. And that's what the Constitution of Liberty is. That's the law of association of liberties. This is restatement of liberalism. And it's in that restatement of liberalism that he provides his critique of social justice. All right, so again, this is the 1950s through 1980. And what was being discussed in the various different, papers. And the Catholic Church is something that he addresses because of the various encyclicals and stuff that are coming out at that time. And so this is where Novak sort of interacts with him in that space. The last part of his career, 1980 till he dies, is this philosophical anthropology, because his argument is that he doesn't understand why reason and this evidence, so why reason and evidence haven't won the day. Right? The Fatal Conceit, which is his last book, he envisioned a grand debate. Like, this is a little bit crazy, right? But he envisioned a grand debate. The leading socialists in the world will all get up on a big stage, and the leading market advocates will get up on a big stage, and then they'll hash it out, and then the rational people will say, that side wins, this side loses, and then they'll let the rules go away, this side will be triumphant. Okay? Like, he actually thought that might happen. It didn't, all right? And so he started asking himself, like, why is this the case? And I think this is fascinating, and maybe we can have some questions and conversations with you about this. But what he does is he seeks it in our instincts. And our instincts, our moral instincts, come from our tribal origins. Okay? And as a result, we're hardwired. Now go back to the monkey experiment. All right? And this is what Novak also talks about. When we were in these tribal paths, it makes sense that we get mad at the chief, who is unfair, gives privileges to some, and exploits others. Because the chief really does serve as the distributor. And it's important in that experiment, if you listen closely, that he starts out by saying they all came from the same tribe or group. They all knew each other from the group. Right? So even though these two new monkeys are brought to the experiment for the first time, they're not brought to each other for the first time. All right? So they view themselves as within each other. And what Hayek argues is that our evolutionary past has in fact generated immaturity in our minds. Now, is that the reason why we can't wrestle with this? Or why we progress so fast? I'm kind of now stuck between these ideas. There's a new book that's influenced me by Bernard Gack, and it's called The Longing for Total Revolution. And what he argues in that book is that if you look at thinkers like Rousseau, Marx, and Nietzsche, they are anti-enlightenment thinkers. And as a result, reason and evidence is not going to be what is determined in debates with them. Instead, it's aesthetics. So whatever you show them about this world, that's not going to sway them, because it's the aesthetics that they care about, not the reason and evidence about these things. And if that's the case, that creates all kinds of other difficulties for us as disciplines to do this. You look at like the work of the psychologist Jonathan Haidt. Is he saying that the reason why the way we should interact with others is that we should give better evidence and better reason, or should we give better narratives? Right? This is what he's trying to get across about these narratives. And that matters to the way that we communicate ideas with one another. Hayek doesn't have much to say about that, because he was stuck in these four things, but that's where we need to go forward. So what was this Hayekian research agenda? So the key thing in the Hayekian research agenda, as opposed to the traditional economist agenda, is that what the normal economist says, and my favorite illustration of this is Bill Easterly's book, The Elusive Quest for Growth. How many have read that or been exposed to it? Is this a few of you? Okay. Bill Easterly was an economist at the World Bank. And he ended up by, you look him up, Google him, he ended up by getting let go. Part of it was he became a critic of Western institutions trying to orchestrate economic growth in less developed economies. And these have led to 3 books now: The Elusive Quest for Growth, which I'm going to talk about, The White Man's Burden, and then most recently, The Tyranny of Experts, in which he argues that because of geopolitics, our development agencies also end up by supporting some of the most worst regimes in the world with respect to human rights. And yet, what does that say then about us Western democracies? That's the most recent book. But in the book, The Elusive Quest for Growth, Easterly does the traditional economist thing. He goes through all the litany of policies that are supposed to make sure that we have greater economic development. Now, let me just give you some background here. This is human history. And this is the Industrial Revolution. And then here's the thing, in the 20th century, is that the difference between the richest countries in the world and the poorest countries in the world was about this difference. And in the 20th century, it became like this. And so to economists, this is a huge puzzle. Because normally, when we think about growth economics, the poor countries should grow faster, and the rich countries grow slower, and so you get catch-up. And the easiest way to communicate that to all of you is to think of sports. Because think about elite athletes. Michael Phelps, we're going before him, Ian Thorpe. Ian Thorpe invented the shark suit. As soon as he won all those gold medals, every single swimmer, from Ian Thorpe level down to like a pool that's in your neighborhood, the kids were swimming, they were wearing a shark suit. Okay? When Michael Phelps ended up by being the best swimmer in the world, everyone imitated his techniques. So if you think about baking a pie, an economic pie, you have basically these resources, technology, resources that are endowment, okay, and management, coaching. And what's going to happen is you borrow as quickly as you can whatever the proper technology is and the proper coaching. And then you see it's up there. If you follow the game of basketball, go back to 1992, when the United States played in the Olympic game. There wasn't a single team there that could stay with those guys. Now, the world has many different people that are great athletes that can play basketball. One of the best rookies in all the NBA right now is an 18-year-old kid. Right? The guy from the guys playing at Dallas. Okay? And they're changing the game. Okay? And the reason is they all caught up. Technologies and coaching transfer. Why did that happen in economics? So that's our mystery that we're trying to explain. Easterly comes along and says, okay, so what did we try? We tried population policies. We tried capital intensity policies. We've tried all education, human capital policies. And what he ended up by arguing is that incentives matter. Incentives matter. That's what he says after each chapter. Blah, 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 and NRI, incentives matter. And the next policy, blah, 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 incentives matter. And so his mantra is incentives matter, and that's what economists always talk about. Okay? Hayek is slightly different. You don't get a Nobel Prize for saying what everyone else says. But you don't get a Nobel Prize for saying things that are so different from what everyone else says that no one understands what you're saying. So if you look at Nobel Prize winners, what they do is they see the world through a prism, and then they slightly twist it. And so what Hayek is asking us is to think about how not only do the different alternative institutional arrangements structure our incentives, but how do they actually impact our learning so we know how to respond to incentives. In order for me to know what the right thing to do is, I have to answer two questions, right? One is why? Why should I do the right thing? But the second one is, what is the right thing to do anyway? And so your system has to actually communicate that to you. And so Hayek is asking us to think about the epistemic properties of these alternative institutional frameworks. What make up those institutional frameworks are going to be your rules of just conduct. Fred mentioned before the de facto and the de jure. You clearly have a de jure framework, which is your law and your politics, but you also have undergirding that community. So the great economists right now, this is more important than anything I'm going to say, write this down, Raghu Rajan has a new book out called The Third Pillar. And in that book, it's about how markets and states have been destroying our communities. And how if we want to have viable markets and states, we need to actually go back and rebuild communities. Right? That's the de facto, not the de jure. This is your underlying thing. Mike Novak was famous for making a following very important statement, which is that a free society works not because of the rigorousness of the de jure system. Right? If you needed a police to enforce contracts on every corner, you couldn't have a free society. It's precisely because people have adopted the moral norms that allow them to cooperate with others in social interactions that we're able to have a free society. To have a self-governing democratic society, which is what Novak is trying to get at when he's talking about the spirit of democratic capitalism. so what does this mean for his principles of justice? First, generality. We want to strive for a system in which the rules are general and not at all designed to benefit someone with privilege. In fact, Hayek makes a big distinction between legislation and law because the root words of legis, which is connected to privileges, as opposed to the law. So he wants no legislation, but he wants law. Because he doesn't want policies that benefit some without benefiting everyone else. And so generality becomes the filter mechanism. Hayek is not, so when Fred mentions this thing about the political economy of anarchism, let me make a quick statement here. This is not a libertarian anarchism. It's a research program about endogenous rule formation. So again, Raghu Rajan, when he was at the IMF and senior economist, he wrote a famous paper called Assuming Anarchy. And the reason for that is very simple. If I'm talking about war-torn states, if I'm talking about least developed economies, why are they war-torn and why are they least developed? Is because their institutional infrastructure ain't working. So it would be a mistake, back to my present value calculation, for me to go in there and say, hey, let's assume enforceable exchangeable property rights, free pricing, right? A central bank that's got its valid rules, got its discretion, and let's just go from there. That's not happening in these places. So what his argument is that when we need to do serious economic analysis, we have to assume that those rules have to be endogenously generated. And that's a research program. How is it that people come to endogenously generate those research things? That's this idea of a self-governing society. And so we need to sort of, what are those rules? How do we find rules that allow us to live better together than we ever could in isolation with one another when we can't rely on a central planner to give us those rules? All right. Now, this also has very strong connections to Rawls. This is maybe a little complicated, but I sent Fred correspondence between Rawls and Buchanan, and Hayek and Buchanan on Rawls. Rawls is a famous essay that Rawls wrote in 1963 in Nomos on constitutions and the basic structure of liberal government, liberal justice. That's different from the theory of justice. And that should be an important research project for those of you who are philosophically oriented. Because what happened to Rawls between 63 and 71? And how does that all play out? And Hayek does the same thought experiment of a veil of ignorance as he tells us in the 1940s when he's deciding whether or not where he should put his kids in the midst of the war. So Britain is being bombed. He teaches at the London School of Economics. He has two little ones. Where should I put those kids? I'm not going to be leaving, but I want to put one of those kids in that. So he says you go behind the veil of ignorance, and you decide which society would be most fair. He, by the way, bites the bullet. What he tells you is that if I could guarantee that my kids could be landed gentry, I would put them in there and let them be landed gentry. He says, but instead, I want to pick a society which has the greatest chances of fairness, as fairness is the structure of the rules. So that's justice as fairness. All right, connection. This is a connection to the James Buchanan project. Buchanan was my teacher, and this is his constitutional construction project, or constitutional economic freedom and constitutional construction. And this finds Hayek, like Buchanan, finds tremendous inspiration in the American project, the founding fathers. Remember, Hamilton, Federalist #1, says, do we leave it to this generation of whether or not our constitutions are a product of accident and force or of reflection and choice? All right, Hayek in many ways thinks that our constitutions are a byproduct of accidents. Long evolutionary history. Buchanan is at odds with that and thinks they're more a choice of our reflection and our constitutional contract. So that's an interesting contact and conflict between them. All right, so just my last slide, which is on the continuing relevance of Hayek. This is directed at the students. A little further, any of your students send me an email, I'll send you a PDF of the book. All right, so you don't have to get it and go even look for it. And you don't mind PDFs, I think. So Fred obviously does. Hayek's relevance is price theoretic. We haven't exhausted the evolutionary potential of Hayek's ideas about the nature of the price system and the dynamic market economy. And so as economic theorists, we should be spending a lot more time on what Hayek's ideas are and developing and going further with that. Not repeating what Hayek said, but taking it going further. For many of you here, you might know of Thomas Sowell. Well, Thomas Sowell wrote a wonderful book called Knowledge and Decisions. And in Knowledge and Decisions, he actually articulates a lot of ways to go with the Hayek and research program. We need more research like Thomas Sowell's Knowledge and Decisions to explore that. Second thing is just genuine institutional economics. That is, economics is at its worst when it doesn't recognize or pay attention to the institutional framework within which economic activity takes place. And within that institutional framework, we have the formal and informal rules of the game. And in that informal rules lies our rules of just conduct. There's the evolution of the mores by which we interact with each other. And unless we pay attention to that and how that can be eroded over time, we're not going to be able to explain social cooperation. And then finally, and this is where I'll end up, for the world today, many might not agree with this, but hopefully that you will. One of the greatest miracles of the last 25 years is that in 2015, less than 10% of the world's population lived on less than $2 a day for the first time. Less than 10%. Remember? That's a miserable existence, abject poverty. For the first time, that's a major miracle. What caused that? The global economy caused that. China was entered into the global economy. India was entered into the global economy. You have mobility of capital and of people. This is what opened up the society. It's the greatest eradicator of poverty that we know. And we should actually have a full-throated defense of the liberal project in our time. And that is the project of cosmopolitan liberalism, as understood by the great tradition of Adam Smith, and David Hume, and carrying forward into John Stuart Mill. So we had the philosophical radicals of the 19th century into the early 20th century. And I would just end with an appeal to looking at like the kind of works that was done by Lionel Robbins, for example, in his defense of international liberalism in the wake of the rise of right-wing and left-wing authoritarianism in the first half of the 20th century. And just to end on a point that Fred raised, in order to make that work, this principle of subsidiarity or interstate federalism becomes the critical idea about how you can operationalize those kind of ideas in practice. You have to have a machinery of freedom in order for freedom to exist, which means you have to have this institutional framework. But what you can't have is an institutional monopoly of the framework. You need to have constant contestation at each of the different items. As they say in the Federalist Papers, the interests of the man must align with the constitutional rights of the place. Now, how do we think about that not only within the U.S. context, but within the broader context of the international economies? We should be, again, going back to our roots in Cadillaxy, which is that the symbol of the K's is two people shaking hands. So rather than us putting barriers to people, we should be reaching our hands across borders and welcoming people in. And that's how you eradicate poverty, and that's how you have this sort of modern project. And we need more voices discussing that. So thank you.